Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Time for this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. And Jerry, while I was watching that Texas win over OU, you see the Allstate logo everywhere. Just a reminder, all of your insurance needs, you can get it all done in one place by getting with our guy, Mark Saunders.
Yeah, that's Texas alum Mark Saunders. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's the only guy you need. That's what that means. He has over 35 years of experience. He's a Texas alum. Once again, everything from your home, car, boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. That's why you give Mark Saunders a call today, 512-218-8571.
Jerry, let's look at what's left in the class of 2026. We're with the halfway point of the season. Seems like as good a time as any. And when we look at the offensive line, this is a position that here on the channel and on the site has gotten a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks. Got a new offer, got a big-time prospect still sitting out there. So where are things at right now for Kyle Flood on the offensive line?
Kyle Flood offered Micah Smith out of Vero Beach. There's worse areas to go evaluate players, by the way, than Vero Beach. Micah Smith, we have some video of him. He's a UCLA commit who just made an official visit to Ohio State 2 weeks ago. Kyle Flood offered him Sunday, and now they're having discussions about an official visit date. We're looking for potentially, assuming he makes an OV to Texas, November 22nd is a possible date. Not that it's locked in, but that's when they're bringing in Braylon Hodge. That seems to be a date later in the year after a lot of teams are done with their high school football playoff. So we'll see. But Micah Smith here, 6'5.5", 325. What's interesting is I was through Vero Beach in September, and I went to see the quarterback throwing Chant Mons, the number one quarterback in the sophomore class, who I think is the number one quarterback for Texas in 2028, and they will eventually offer him. Micah Smith was out injured the day. I got unlucky. He missed a little time with a minor knee sprain, I believe it was, or lower body injury. I missed him the day I was at practice, so I did not get to see him, but I've known the head coach there, Lenny Jankowski, for years, and he's very high on where Micah Smith has gone as a player in the last year. He's a transfer in from John Carroll, a private school in Fort Pierce area, which is a little south of Vero. But this is a guy who has really good feet. He can really bend. He's aggressive, and he's really matured at this Vero Beach program as a football player in the last year. So this is a guy that Ohio State and Texas, Tennessee, Auburn, South Carolina, some of the schools that are really pushing for him as a senior. I think it's unlikely he ends up at UCLA. The question is, could Texas beat out Ohio State for him? That can only happen if Micah Smith schedules an official visit, but he's a really good one.
Jerry, let's stay on the offensive line and talk about Malachi Lee, because a big prospect out of Hawaii committed to Michigan. Texas stays on him. Yep. And I want to get into the Malachi Lee discussion by starting with this. Sharon Moore's future at Michigan, and I only bring that up because if Penn State, the year after being in the playoff, can give James Franklin $50 million to walk away and not coach anymore, there's a lot of stuff on the table that maybe I thought wasn't on the table before. So how much does what Michigan does from here on out, because we know Sark isn't going anywhere, right? What Michigan does from here on out, how could that impact Malachi Lee's decision?
I think it could be very impactful here. I mean, if Michigan takes another loss and loses a couple more losses, then loses to Ohio State, they may feel some pressure to make a move because that Penn State job opening is going to be interesting because who they could potentially command for that job. And Michigan does not want to lose pace with Ohio State.
Right.
And Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. I mean, it's a different dynamic in this region right now, in the Midwest region, because Ohio State and Notre Dame are both good. And Penn State was good last year, has talent. Now they're going to hire a new head coach and get a bump from that. So that region can get extremely difficult in recruiting if Ohio State and Notre Dame are both good. Oh, and Penn State now is going to have more added excitement with a new hire. Not that they didn't have excitement going into the year, but I think get what I'm talking about here. So that adds a little pressure on Michigan to not fall behind in their eyes. So if they don't think Sharon Moore's the guy, they could potentially make a move because that's not a big buyout compared to others, right? So Michigan could potentially make a move there, and obviously that would impact Malachi Lee greatly because the one thing Sharon Moore did very well in that recruitment of Malachi Lee, he himself went out to Honolulu. He showed Malachi Lee how important he was, and that's the former OC and OL coach, a former offensive lineman. I think that had a great impact on Malachi Lee, but Texas is going to remain in the hunt there, and I think right now you would love to either get Malachi Lee or Micah Smith. If you get one of those guys, you're very happy with your offensive line class.
Let's look at the defensive line class, Jerry. We'll get back to the offense here in just a minute, but Kenny Baker's put together a heck of a class.
Yeah.
But it seems like everybody's still pursuing the guys in his class. But at the same time, there are guys out there, Kendall Graville, chief among them, that Kenny Baker hasn't given up on either. Still some, I don't want to say moving parts, but a little volatility in defensive line recruiting as we head down the stretch in the 26 cycle.
Yeah, look, I mean, they're Southeast region guys or and defensive linemen are at a premium. So people aren't going to back off. Like with case of Vodney Cleveland,
right.
Florida hadn't backed off of him. Now, what does that mean? Probably nothing. They're probably going to have a coaching change here. Auburn continues to fight for Corey Wells. What's that going to mean? They could have a coaching change there. Who knows, right? Ole Miss is after Dylan Berryman. I think the ball's in Texas court there. Texas absolutely wants to keep Corey Wells. They absolutely want to keep Vodney Cleveland. Then you have Kendall Graville, who's committed to Florida but remains in touch with Texas. And I think there's a decent chance he's going to be on campus in November, even after his ACL injury. That's how much Texas really likes Kendall Graville. And we've seen Sark and this staff stay on their top target guys late into the cycle, even if they commit elsewhere. And again, with the instability at Florida, that's going to cause concern for Kendall Graville, or is causing concern there. So I think there's a lot of things at play in D-line. I mean, then there's everybody always asks about Jamion Winfield. I think that one's a long shot. I think Texas has tried because I think Jamion Winfield may be the best prospect of all of them. James Johnson, Miami won't give up on him, by the way, committed to Texas. And I think Jamion Winfield's probably the best prospect of all these guys we're talking about, but I think he's the longest shot for Texas at the same time. And then there's Keith Doty, who's at Mesquite Petit, committed to SMU. Texas is keeping some tabs on him as a senior as well. But really for me with this class, it's about keeping James Johnson in the boat, which I do think he wants to go out of state. Could Miami change at the end of the day? We'll see. They won't give up. Vodney Cleveland, Corey Wells. We'll see what happens with Dylan Berryman. Then can you flip Kendall Graville and keep all the other guys you have? At least three of the guys you have. I think in that scenario, Texas would be extremely happy with their D-line class. So I think there's some balls in the air here. There's a lot of moving parts, and we'll see how it plays out. But the one thing we do know is Texas loves James Johnson. They love Vodney Cleveland. They want to keep Corey Wells in the class, and they would love to flip Kendall Graville.
Jerry, you mentioned Braylon Hodge a little bit ago. Let's bring him in, the linebacker out of Cherry Creek High School. Kyle Shanahan went to Cherry Creek, by the way. Also Gunnar Helm, also Cherry Creek alum. So there's some Texas ties there. But let's go ahead and talk about Dre Quinn, too. One of my favorite prospects in the class since decommitted from Clemson. Jerry, is this kind of an either-or thing, or would Texas want both of these guys in the class if they can get it done?
Yeah, no, Braylon Hodge, linebacker all the way, Dre Quinn, edge all the way. And Dre Quinn's interesting. He follows the Micah Smith recruitment in a different way. He decommitted from Clemson. And who were your players there for a while? Texas and Tennessee. And initially when he decommitted, everybody thought, okay, this will be Texas over Tennessee. Well, then he goes and visits Ohio State the same weekend Micah Smith visits Ohio State. So what's really happening here is Texas is going to end up battling Ohio State for a couple of guys. And it's not that Tennessee's not a player for Dre Quinn, couldn't be a player for Micah Smith, but this could really come down to Ohio State versus Texas on Dre Quinn and Micah Smith. But Texas loves Dre Quinn. They never backed off Dre Quinn. He's having a really good senior season. I think he's a high-end prospect, very similar to Zena. I think there's some similarities with Zena, frame-wise, and talent-wise, and kind of combine testing numbers, the length, and kind of the way they play. I think there's some similarities there between those two guys. And then Braylon Hodge is going to, he decommitted from Michigan State, obviously. He's going to go to Texas, Oregon, or Michigan, and uncertainty around Michigan. There is certainty around Oregon and Texas. I do think Texas getting 2 visits here. They get the last OV. That's for the Arkansas game. I think that's a pretty big deal. I like, barring a major change, I'm liking Texas' chances for Braylon Hodge right now, unless Braylon Hodge does more of a 180 towards Oregon after his visit there recently, and Texas does a 180 on wanting Braylon Hodge in the class. I think Texas is in a pretty good position going into that official visit late November.
Real quick, Jerry, before we move on, November 22nd, that's Braylon Hodge's official visit weekend. You mentioned that date earlier. you're thinking, okay, wouldn't you want prospects on campus for the A&M game? But think about the A&M game is Thanksgiving weekend. Probably makes more sense to do the official visit weekend, not on a holiday weekend.
Yeah. That November 22nd weekend, playoff football permitting, is when I think you're going to see Texas try to get guys in, because that thing around Thanksgiving, that's a tough one. That's just tough from a timing perspective, travel perspective, and everything like that. It's an easier ask and task to get guys in for that Arkansas game for Texas. And that A&M is also a short week, right? And then coaches have to get on the road after that. If you're not, the other thing with the A&M game is we'll see where things go. You could be in the SEC championship game. And so there's preparation that comes with that as well. So that's starting right after the A&M game. Coaches could be on the road for a day. That's a tougher spot. Arkansas is the game you want to have the guys in for. And again, Braylon Hodge OV that weekend. I think Texas is going to try to get multiple guys committed elsewhere, or that recruitments are back open on campus November 22nd. And that's also late enough to where a lot of teams are done in the playoffs. So the ones that are playing for a lot. So they won't be visiting anywhere.
Jerry, one more name to mention on defense before we shift gears and change back to the offense and finish up there. Dylan Waters, cornerback out of Missouri City, Fort Bend Marshall, committed to Utah. One of the first conversations we had, there were two coaches that you told me, and I filed it away. One does not apply anymore. But you said, hey, if Art Briles offers a quarterback or Morgan Scalley offers a defensive back, probably want to double back and check those guys because somebody missed something. And so anytime you got a defensive back committed to Utah that Texas is showing interest in, my ears perk up.
Yeah, Dylan Waters, a senior at obviously 2026 at Fort Bend Marshall, same high school as Caleb Chester from last year's class. He is playing corner. He's playing wide receiver. He committed to Utah over UCLA in June. A guy that Mark Orfe went to check out a couple weeks ago. They brought him up for the Red River game, him and his family, and they have not offered as of last night, but they're continuing to evaluate him and keep tabs on him. They're also that also will tell you Texas does want another corner type or defensive back in this class. Devon Benjamin was who they loved. He committed to Oregon. We haven't heard anything on that. They're taking a look at some senior corners in the state of Texas. Dylan Waters being one of those. We'll see if Texas takes the next step and offers him. If they do, I think that recruitment would end pretty quickly, honestly. But like you said, Jeff, when Utah evaluates defensive backs in the state of Texas, they have a pretty high hit rate and success rate. And I'm not just talking about NFL draft picks, but just success in college. So Dylan Waters, 6'1", about 175, plays both sides of the ball for Fort Bend Marshall, is a guy that Texas likes. We'll see if they take it to the next level with an offer or get him back on campus in November and head towards an offer before signing day.
Jerry, one more time, let everybody know about our sponsor for each and every edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. That's our good friend, Mark Saunders.
Yeah, give Mark Saunders a call. He serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's got the home, the car, the boat, the motorcycle, RV, and ATV. It's hunting season, ATVs. He everything, one-stop shop. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Not only is he a Texas alum, he's got 35 years of experience in this industry. When we had one of our preseason get-togethers, us and Third and Longhorn in Austin, number of people met Mark Saunders there and around the Texas gathering, and a number of people called Mark Saunders, and he handled all their insurance needs. Here's a way you can do the same. Call Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571.
Jerry, before we go to receiver look, we're going to end it talking Jalen Lott, but talking about Dylan Waters brought something for me. It's the concept of there are still guys in this state that you can go after, and really across the country, senior eval guys. And I know there are others, but the two that stand out to me, Grayson Littleton was a Texas followed and jumped on kind of at the 11th hour. And Jalen Ford was a guy that the previous staff, the Tom Herman staff, stayed on, a kid committed to Utah and kind of snuck him in there during the early signing period. Jerry, I don't know. It just does my heart good that there are still kids out there that are going to be late bloomers that even the blue blood schools can still find room for.
Yeah, and Braylon Hodge in this class too. He may be this year's Grayson Littleton, so to speak, a guy who's a 4-star prospect now. That was committed to Michigan State. I mean, obviously Grayson Littleton was ranked higher, committed to Clemson, but there still are those guys for sure. Jalen Fords of the world. Look, I just saw a linebacker last week at Anna High when I went to see 2027 offensive lineman Peyton Miller, center that Texas absolutely loves. There's a linebacker, Jaden Parker, that moved in from Wichita Collegiate High in Kansas to Anna High School. He was 6 foot, about 202, 203, I think 205 when he showed up. He's now 6 foot 225. He returns punts for touchdowns. He is how you would draw a guy up. He's committed to Arizona currently. Big schools are starting to take a look at him. There are guys out there, and sometimes it's because a kid moves in. He got in the weight room for the first time, and his body's just blown up, and he's retained his speed, and he has that look of a guy that could be big time down the line. So there's a linebacker popping up in this state like that too, and it won't surprise me if Texas doesn't evaluate him as a senior just to make sure he's not a guy they need to have in the program because he's got that SEC build and that SEC athleticism. But there's guys like that all around the state of Texas, the state of Florida, and the state of Georgia because they have so many football prospects, and they all can't be Power 4 guys or top 25 program level guys as juniors in high school. There is still the process of late development physically, getting serious about the weight room. How about just coming to football late? Yeah. How about moving in somewhere and getting in a really – look, Nick Brooks is already a national recruit, but you know how much it did for him to go to Grayson his senior year and play against D1 guys every year and get serious about his conditioning? And I know he was already a top 100 guy in the country, but there are players out there like that who maybe circumstance was not good. They move to a different school. They get in a really good program. Then they start to develop and get serious about football. There's so many guys out there to evaluate. And that's the thing I think I may love most about this staff from a recruiting perspective. They stay on their top tier guys all the way through signing day, the guys they really believe in, they really love. But then at the same time, they're also scouring the states they have to recruit well for those senior risers because they do still exist even in this day and age of early commitments and early offers and early decisions.
You know, one of my favorites, Jerry, and we'll move on, but think about late risers. I remember it was during a spring going into the kid's senior year out at San Antonio Stevens, and the coach said, hey, we got this kid who's a basketball player, couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time when we got him, but we think there's something there. Marcus Davenport ended up going to UTSA and ended up being a first-round draft pick. So it's fun to see those guys, like you said, that even if they get to football late, guys that end up developing and hitting their ceiling, those guys are really fun to follow. Jerry, we put it off long enough. Let's go to wide receiver. We'll talk about Chris Henry Jr. a little bit, but everybody wants to know what's going on with Jalen Lott. So, Jerry, Chris Henry Jr., Jalen Lott, whichever one you want to take, the floor is yours.
Well, let's realistic. Let's go with Jalen Lott. Jalen Lott, the Oregon commitment, the Texas legacy. I continue to here there's some positive things there for the Longhorns. We'll see where it goes. But since that visit to Texas, him and his family made, continue to hear positives with Texas and Jalen Lott. And so, again, I don't think this is a decision that has anything to do with one game winning or losing. I think this is a decision that will come down to, do you want to stay close to home or do you not? And I know it's easier flights to Eugene now than it used to be. I know NIL makes that travel easier on families. But still, this comes down to, do you really want to go that far from home at the end of the day, or do you want to stay close to home and kind of go to the school you probably always wanted to go to? And I think the NIL is going to be close enough in that case, if that's what Jalen Lott wants to do. He's had some really good conversations with Chris Jackson and Steve Sarkisian and the Texas staff. This season, Texas has never backed off of him. And it's a known that's wide receivers what he wants to be. Texas is solely recruiting him there. As far as Chris Henry goes, look, he would have to show up in November. Otherwise, this is clickbait for me. If he doesn't show up in November, I hate to fall into the clickbait world. Obviously, schools are still going to try to recruit Chris Henry. He's arguably the best receiver in the country. But unless he shows up in Austin, we're just talking about clicks. So is Texas still recruiting Chris Henry along with about everybody else? Sure they are. Is it a reality? Could this be a reality? Not unless he shows up in November.
Jerry, one thing to end with real quick, and I only mentioned this because Bobby brought it up over on ontexasfootball.com in his Tuesday morning post. Not just Texas, but around the country, you might start seeing guys that have played their 4 games take the red shirt and wait to jump into the portal. Any position groups, Jerry, you think that if attrition impacts it, that you could see the staff maybe going out there and getting another guy, or do they already have backup plans for their backup plans?
Yeah, I think it's more likely portal right now, for me at least. I mean, look, it's hard unless this coaching carousel opens up something obvious. And I think that would be more after signing day for the 26 class in high school. Maybe some guys that want to get out of a letter through the coaching carousel. I'm assuming you even have to go through a process to get out of an LOI anymore. But I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that's where Texas would go right now, unless it was something that happened through the coaching carousel. I think the portal would be more likely. But now, with that said, Texas has needs left to fill on the high school level. But I think it's a balancing act between high school and portal.
All right, Jerry, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to Mark Saunders, Allstate, for sponsoring it. If you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, you want more recruiting intel, you can get it over there. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're not missing any of our recruiting coverage or our team coverage before, during, and after every Texas game this season. For Jerry, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.